From the city of broad shoulders, this is Chicago Unscripted. Here's your host, Joe Dunlin, who's sitting in my old chair these days at CBS News Chicago. Good Lord, I hope they cleaned that seat.
We have a sort of 2-for-1 on this episode of Chicago Unscripted. My guest, Willie Geist, is the versatile and personable host of MSNBC's Morning Joe and Sunday Today on NBC. Willie was born in Evanston, but moved to New Jersey when his dad got a job with the New York Times. You might remember his dad, Bill Geist, a talented humorist who wrote for the Chicago Tribune. He later went on to enjoy a 31-year career at CBS, doing features for the show CBS Sunday Morning. Bill just turned 80 and is battling Parkinson's, as did my dad. Willie and I talk about that fight, and he shares a powerful story about running the New York City Marathon to raise money for the Michael J. Fox Foundation and Parkinson's research. Back in 2014, Willie and his dad wrote a book together. We get into that. It's called Good Talk, Dad, and I highly recommend it. It's a laugh-out-loud journey packed with candid stories covering Willie's childhood. And I suggest you listen to the book if you can, because Willie and his dad both narrate it. There's a lot of Chicago and Illinois in Geist family history, much of it packed with humor. Why Bill wouldn't let Willie be a Cubs fan, why Willie remains a big Illini fan to this day, and why Chicago still feels like home. He's become known and respected for his long-form interviews, the Sunday Sitdown, as it's called on Sunday Today. He's talked to some of the biggest names in politics, music, movies, and more. He walks us through his most memorable interviews and one that didn't go quite as planned. We also cover the state of the media today, the fallout from the lawsuit President Trump filed against 60 Minutes, and correspondent Scott Pelley's comments on that lawsuit at a recent commencement speech. You don't work as long as Willie has in this business at that level without accumulating stories, and he has a lot of them. And when you hear the ease with which he shares them, you quickly understand what makes him one of the most relatable and likable personalities on TV. Here's Willie Geist. Willie, it's great to have you on. Thanks for the time.
Thanks for having me, Joe. I'm excited to talk to a Chicago man. It's my roots here.
I know. Well, we'll get into that. And you're pretty much everywhere. I looked up at the TV the other day. You were hosting the Kelly Clarkson show.
I know. You know, that's one of the funny things about working at 30 Rock. This building is like a tree house. On every floor, there's a different show. So I think in a moment of desperation, they were like, literally, who's in the building? And so I'm on the third floor, and I went up to the sixth floor, and for some reason hosted the Kelly Clarkson show.
Well, that sounds typical for you, being very humble and modest, because that's not easy to do. I mean, the good ones make it look easy, and you do, but I think that definitely allows you to sort of hit your sweet spot, right? Not everyone can just step in and do a show like that.
I'd been a guest on it a few times, so I had kind of a feel for the lay of the land and the producers. Actually, they have a lot of producers who used to be at the Today Show. It's sort of all this in the building thing. So it felt familiar, different, obviously, than anything I've ever done. You know, she opens the show by singing. She does a karaoke. Uh-huh. I had to clarify right from the beginning. You know, there's no singing, right? And they said, oh, God, no, we don't want you to sing. So I said, okay. I want to lead with that, and whatever happens from there, I'm good with. But just you do not want me to open the show with a song, believe me.
Well, that may be the only thing you can't do, Willie. I don't know. It seems to me that hosting the Today Show or any morning news program at that level is one of the toughest jobs in the business. You have hard news interviews. You're talking to newsmakers and politicians, families who've gone through trauma. You're doing features and fun stories. If you can host that show, you can pretty much do anything in TV, I think.
Yeah, the Today Show is a fascinating skill to develop, hosting the Today Show, which I took time to learn, you know, because like you say, you may be interviewing the Secretary of State at 7:05 and then cooking an omelet with Martha Stewart an hour later. And one thing I learned from the people who I watched and, you know, kind of mentored under was to give as much care and, at least in some cases, the appearance of enthusiasm for the omelet that you gave to the Secretary of State. In other words, you can't do one and roll your eyes at the other. Like, you're all in on everything, and you just go, you know, you give it everything you got. So I think actually that's the fun of it too, which is like you get to scratch the itch in that first hour of all the news that's coming on. You get to talk to interesting people and talk to correspondents and wherever the action is. And then as you turn the corner, like last week, I was in there with Savannah and John Krasinski and Natalie Portman walk in the studio.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Now we're doing this. And to be able to just kind of shift that gear.
Yeah, that is a talent. And I don't know that people realize that, but it really is. Do people recognize you more from Morning Joe or Sunday Today?
Great question. So Morning Joe is diehard politicos, I would say. So if I'm in New York or I'm in Washington or Boston, East Coast sort of with politics, running through their veins, it's definitely Morning Joe. But I would say when I go out on vacation or go out on shoots or any of that, I would say it's 90% Today Show. So because I've done, I do the Sunday Today Show now, but I've also been over there filling in since I think like 2010. I co-hosted the third hour of the Today Show for 4 years with Al Roker and Natalie Morales and Tamron Hall. So I've been there in that family for 15 years now. So I think people the truth is the two audiences often don't know I do the other show. I'll say, they go, "Oh, you got the weekend off?" The Morning Joe viewers, they go, "Well, not really. I'm doing the Sunday show." What's the Sunday show? And vice versa. The Today Show audience isn't even aware that I'm doing this 4-hour show at 6 a.m. on MSNBC. It's kind of interesting.
Well, Sunday Today seems like it's perfect for you. It's your show. It gets to highlight your personality and your humor and your breadth of knowledge. You started, I think, back in 2016. Were you able to shape that into what you wanted it to be?
I was, and it's April of 2016, so it's been over 9 years. And they, at the time, I was hosting that third hour of the Today Show, and I was doing MSNBC. And then they said, "Hey, would love for you to take a crack at the weekends." And I said, "I do work the other 5 days, so can I just pick one of the weekend days and not do a full 7 days rotation?" They go, "Oh yeah, that's right. You should have one day off." So they gave me to their credit, they gave me that hour, and I said, "You got to let me try to make it my own." And that took time because I started with a show that I thought would be sort of a combination of my two lives, Morning Joe and the Today Show. So it opened with kind of a round table talking about the issues of the day. And I loved it. I'm not sure the audience loved it as much as I did, which is you have a Today Show audience that expects to wake up and here's the news this morning. Here are the things that happened overnight. Here's what's going on today. So you have to deliver on that. So we sort of switched it up, and over time it's evolved. I mean, every year we do something a little bit different, but probably 5 years ago, we sort of hit on this formula that we're in right now. And I think the tentpole always, though, from the beginning has been the one big interview that we do. And we try to, the nice thing about doing once a week is you can really curate that guest and get someone will be a great talker who has something to say, a story to tell. It doesn't have to be that quick 5-minute, tell me about the movie you're in and what was it like working with De Niro, and then you say goodbye. So I get to dig in a little bit deeper and really find guests with a story to tell and something to say.
Well, over those 8 years or so that you've been doing this, I don't know, you've probably done 400 of these sit downs, I would imagine, just rough estimate and back of the napkin math. But I know just flipping through the Sunday sit downs, you get your choice of guests and you get great ones. You just sat down with Ina Garten. But give me one or two of those that are your favorites, people you didn't know who just blew you away.
For me, it's the people that when I was growing up, or was just a fan, that they lived on a different planet, right? These celebrities, when you grow up in Evanston, Illinois, where I started and then moved to New Jersey, the people on TV and the movies just existed on some other plane, and you were never going to actually intersect with them. So when we get the show to a point where I say, let's try to get Letterman on. I loved David Letterman growing up. I think a whole generation of us did. And it turned out we live not far from each other, a little north of the city, and we go to the same bait shop. So I basically
bait shop?
Bait fishing.
To fish?
Yeah. So I basically booked the interview through our bait shop. Two great guys, Charlie and Todd, run the bait shop. And so David was aware that I went to the shop and all this. And so when we approached him, we said, what if we went fly fishing?
Yeah.
And we'll do it right by your house. We're not going to drag you wherever you don't want to go. And so this was just a couple of years ago. He had the Netflix show, but he was also just kind of like, he was more available than he would have been if he was doing a show every night. So we went fly fishing in a little stream up in Westchester County in New York. had a great time, didn't catch a thing, because it turns out when you're fly fishing, it doesn't help to have 8 guys in a crew stomping through the water and all the fish
The fish
running
can
away.
see you. That's what I'm told, right?
Yeah,
That's
they
crazy.
see you, they hear you. There was not a fish within 100 miles of us at that point. And then we got out of the stream after not catching a single fish, and we just sat in 2 chairs on the banks of this little river and talked for probably an hour and a half about his life and his career. And so that's one where you're sitting there going, that's David Letterman, the guy I would stay up late to watch. Or when I finally got to college and I didn't have to mind the rules of my house, that I would always stay up every night to watch on TV at 11:30. And to have to step onto his plane, even just a moment, to be on his planet just for a moment, to have his attention, to be able to ask him all the things so many of us have always wondered about him, was great. He had the Santa Claus beard, which he still has. And we're sitting across from each other. My first question, because it was relatively new, I said, what's the deal with the beard? And like that, he goes, well, what's the deal with your toupee? And I was like, I just got burned by Letterman. Like, this is a dream come true. He did. I mean, if you watch the tape, there's not even a beat between the two comments.
I know.
He just hammered me right away. We were off to the races.
I remember interviewing Jimmy Fallon once, and I know you've had him on your sit down, but I was thinking this was right when he got the Tonight Show. And I remember thinking, I need to come up with a question that sort of points out the magnitude of him getting this job. And what I found was that more people had landed on the moon than had hosted the Tonight Show.
Wow.
And so when I got in the interview, I said to Jimmy, I said, I don't know if you realize this, but more people have landed on the moon than have hosted the Tonight Show. And again, without skipping a beat, he says, and to think, I've done both.
There's a reason they are where they are, right? The brains work that quickly.
It's scary.
Letterman was a really special one. Bill Murray's another one. Chicago. I don't know if you've had this experience, but still to this day, when you want to book Bill Murray, you have to call like a 1-800 number and leave a message on a machine. He doesn't have a publicist or anything. He's just a guy out in the world. And if he was interested, he'll call you back. So we tried to book him. He didn't call back, but then he was on the Today Show live to do a different segment. And he said to our bookers, hey, I forgot to tell you, I want to do that Willie Geist show. And they went, okay. Let's just do it right after this. And I said, well, that's not quite how it works. Let's get to the location and set up the crew and book the location. All that. So he said, all right, do it tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Just come by the hotel. So we call the hotel where he's staying. So at 10 o'clock the next morning, we're set up on the top floor of the hotel. It's a beautiful bar in New York. And the elevator doors open and off it walks Bill Murray. And you're like, there it is, right? Caddyshack and Ghostbusters and SNL. And his hair is kind of messed up, and he's just in he's in New Balance shoes with corduroy pants, a little golf zip up. And again, sat and told me stories for an hour and a half about all those movies that I loved growing up, and behind the scenes stories of SNL and being in a stall drinking Jack Daniels with Keith Richards. It's just like the stories.
Wait, was this on the air, part of the interview, or before you started?
Yeah, no, the Stones thing is on in the interview. So that's just, those are, I've been lucky to talk to so many fascinating, smart people who have incredible life experiences, but the ones that were heroes, I guess you could say, are the ones that are a little extra special.
Yeah. Is there a guest you want, but you haven't been able to get?
It's funny. Yes. After almost 10 years, you figure we've talked to everybody, right? And then you go down and you go, oh my gosh, there's this long list of people. Like this year, Will Ferrell, who is like the model guest for our show, finally just came on this year. And it was phenomenal. It was so much fun. He was great. It was right before the SNL 50. And, sometimes scheduling or projects or whatever it is, it didn't work out. So there's always a list of people. Taylor Swift, of course, we've been working on for a long time. I would love to sit and talk to Jay-Z. He's always been a favorite of mine. Tom Hanks, believe it or not, has not been on the show. He's sometimes it just takes time. Like Tina Fey, again, model guest for our show. She was just on last year. So sometimes it's just a question of who certain projects they want to do a longer interview for, or just want to talk about that project. So the list is so long. And then in the course of 9 years, new people come up. Timothy Chalamet, I didn't know about when I started the show 9 years ago. Would love to interview him. So yeah, there's definitely a long list.
Sunday morning has become some of the best TV on the air, in my opinion. I mean, CBS Sunday mornings is like church. You hear the trumpet and it's like the ice cream truck is coming. And I know your dad worked for that program for years. It's great TV.
It is. Yeah. He was a correspondent. So he worked at the New York Times for a long time. He was at the Chicago Trib before that, but he was at the Times. And Don Hewitt was the executive producer of 60 Minutes at the time, famous, legendary guy. He read my dad's column all the time and loved it. It's called the About New York column in the Times. And he called him and he said, do you ever think about turning these human interests, these really funny pieces into television? My dad said, no, literally never crossed my mind. He's like, let's shoot a little pilot and see what it looks like. So I think they just took one of the pieces he'd written and kind of brought it to life and went and shot the interviews on camera and did all that. And it was really good. And so CBS decided they'd offer him a spot on CBS Sunday Morning. This is like 1988, I want to say. And he was there for 31 years. So that was an unexpected turn, not something he was looking for. He felt like, I'm at the New York Times, I made it to the mountaintop. And then there was this other thing that came along that was exciting. And he spent 30 years on Sunday Morning, a show I still love and a show that inspires our show when we're developing it. We thought the model of it's Sunday morning, slow down a little bit, deep breath. People will spend time with you. They're not rushing off to work or getting to school. They're sitting there in their robes and our yellow mug and they got their slippers on. They might have the paper open to the side if people still read the paper anymore. I don't know. Some people do. And so I think what I learned from them is pacing and storytelling that you probably wouldn't do on a bang, bang, bang weekday morning news show, that you can go deeper and tell stories.
Your dad, Bill, he did a story, and I don't know if you'll remember it, but I do. I've never forgotten it. I remember laughing out loud. He did a story about smoking. And I don't remember exactly what the hook was, but at one point, as part of his stand-up, he must have had 50 cigarettes in his mouth.
Oh my gosh. I gotta go look that up.
I tried to find it and I couldn't. Well, I mean, he's got so much work, but he was such an anomaly in television and he made it look so easy. He's just sort of effortlessly everyday man funny.
Yeah. And I think because he never thought of himself as a television personality, he was a writer who, as I said, was kind of pulled in to this world, and he had no training on TV. He never was playing TV. He didn't have sort of the anchorman, like camera, turn to the camera, and he never preened. I think he just wrote really well, and he's from downstate Illinois. He's from Champaign. I think he had true affinity and felt like he knew all the people that he went out and talked to, because they were the people he knew growing up and the people he loved at state fairs and all the places he went, and rock skipping contest and cow chip tossing contest, like all these crazy things that he did. He wasn't ever there to laugh at them. He was there to celebrate the quirkiness of these communities that, like, people he knew in New York had no relationship to. And he's like, no, there's this amazing country out there. You got to go meet these people.
Yeah, and he fit right in.
Yeah.
That was a big reason I wanted to talk with you, Willie, because I just recently read your book With Your Dad, Good Talk Dad. And actually, our meteorologist, Albert Ramon, gave me a fantastic tip to listen to it on Audible and not read it, because you and your dad narrate it. And that's a great bit of advice. If anyone listening is going to read it, I would highly suggest you do that, because there are so many laugh out loud stories, and we'll chop some of that up. But let me ask you first how your dad's doing.
He's doing well. Thank you for asking. Yeah, he's got Parkinson's he was diagnosed in 92. So I guess that's 33 years. Yeah, 33. He was 47 when he was diagnosed with Parkinson's.
Oh.
And I always hesitate to put it this way because it sounds odd, but if you can be fortunate while having Parkinson's, he was, in that it was so slow moving,
right,
slow progressing, that he was able to continue his life and his job. And in fact, for probably 10 years, I'd say at least, he was on the air and you never would have known. I think we noticed at home that he was slowing down a little bit, but I mean, he's on a plane every week and he's going to these corners of the country and catching connections and interviewing people and writing and tracking and doing all the things you do to make those pieces come to life. And by the way, then coming home and being the dad of kids and teenagers and all that. So it got to a point probably 20 years in where it was obvious to the audience, like, what's going on, and with his involuntary movement. And so he announced it which he was always hesitant to do for a million reasons, because there's a little of that like Midwestern stoicism, like you don't talk about this stuff, you just put your head down and go. And also there's, in our business, I think he thought, okay, if I'm known as the guy with Parkinson's, does that shorten my lifespan in terms of my professional life? So it didn't. CBS was great and said it never would have. We're so, we love you too much. But yeah, that's been 33 years and he's doing okay. He just turned 80 a couple of weeks ago.
You guys went down to Champaign to celebrate, didn't you?
Well, we didn't go this time, but we had an Illini themed party at my sister's house up here, where everyone dressed in Illinois gear. My 15-year-old son wore a D Brown jersey from the 2005 team. And the school was amazing. Our friend Robin Kaler, who's at Illinois, coordinated to get Brett Bielema, the football coach, to send a video, got Brad Underwood to send a video. We got Josh Whitman, the AD, to send a video congratulating. Kendall Gill from the Flying Illini 989 said it. So it was really, he feels so strongly about Illinois and Champaign, and that's where my parents met, that it just felt like a good way to. My sister's like, we got to do some kind of theme, and then she was like, we're all on Amazon ordering as much orange as possible.
Right. I saw on Instagram where you posted a picture. I thought you had gone. This was for his 80th birthday, right?
Yeah, his 80th birthday. I think the picture that was in the post was when he was the grand marshal in the homecoming parade about 10 years ago. And yeah, he rode in the back of the car with my kids when they were little. And then you got to do the end zone wave during a timeout of the football game. So he stood out there with my mom and our two kids, and the four of them were on the Jumbotron in Illinois, and he got a big ovation. And I thought, he grew up very humbly in that town, and to think that like someday he'd be standing in that end zone getting a roar from a sold out crowd because of the things he'd done with his life, it was a pretty special day.
Well, my dad had Parkinson's as well, and it was a learning experience for me. I had no idea how little we really know about how we get it, about whether it's hereditary. There really isn't a cure, although there's a new cocktail that my dad used that worked fairly well. He got it late, like your dad, and also it was slow progressing. But he would lock up. He couldn't move. He'd be frozen on his walker. He would reach for things that weren't there. The hallucinations. You don't know about a lot of this stuff, and I know
that's right.
You think your dad got it in Vietnam, right?
Well, his doctors do. Yeah, it was sort of mystifying everybody, and then finally, I think a doctor said, "Hey, were you in Vietnam by any chance?" He said, "I was, 69 and 70." And they kind of traced where he was, and it was right in the hot zone where they were dropping Agent Orange every day, which, take the leaves off all the trees so they could see down into the jungles, but also happened to have the effect of all of our soldiers inhaling it. So there have been class action suits. Thousands of guys suffered neurological consequences from that. It's interesting. I was interviewing Gloria Estefan a couple of weeks ago, and her dad was there around the same time inhaling Agent Orange, and he had MS shortly thereafter and died too young. So it's a real thing that happened, and my dad was there in Vietnam. So the doctors don't see any genetic component to it. The best answer they have is that it's from Vietnam.
Well, I know this has become a cause for you, working closely with the Michael J. Fox Foundation. You even ran the New York City Marathon and raised, $300,000, I guess.
Yeah, that was, I'd never run a marathon. I wasn't a runner. It actually came up it was in COVID in 2020. And it was like, what can I be doing that gets you going every day and something that's hopefully productive for other people? So I decided to run the marathon that year. And then we got to like June and they canceled the marathon, or July maybe even. So I had to train and wait for another year. So I did it in 2021. And it was, I did it to raise money for the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and it was incredible. We actually got over $500,000, and it was all like $5, $10, $20. There was no big like $50,000 corporate donation. It was, and you'd read the messages, and they said, I don't have a lot to give you, but this is $5. My brother has Parkinson's, or here's $20. My mother died of Parkinson's. And like, once you see all that, it was incredibly moving. So didn't need much more motivation than that. I had written on my arm, I wrote just dad in Sharpie, just like, don't forget why we're doing this. If you're thinking about bailing out at mile 20. And I did it under 4 hours. It was
you were running 9-minute miles. That's amazing.
for a first timer, not bad. My goal was to get under 4, and then I got to a point where I was like, this ain't happening. and then I was running up Fifth Avenue, so that means there are probably 4 miles maybe left to go. Really, you don't realize Fifth Avenue is uphill when you're in a cab, but when you're running, you're like, oh, this is uphill. And somebody actually came out onto the course and said, somebody wants to say hello to you, so go up to the left. And Michael lives on Fifth Avenue. Michael J. Fox had come out of his building.
No way.
Came downstairs out of his building, and he was there with his wife, Tracy, and some other people leaning on a cane. And I saw him and the emotions of his being there and of the day. And I just like lost it and broke into a sprint. I gave him a big sweaty hug, and I still get chills thinking about it.
I got the chills right now.
He patted me on the back. And I was really like kind of shuffling at that point. He patted me on the back, and I just blazed, I swear, the rest of the way. And I got under 4 hours, which I didn't think I was going to be able to do. And I give him credit for that. Once I saw him, I was like, you gotta get under, you're going to finish, but you need to meet your goal, So that was so special, and I'll never forget that.
What a great story. So what was the process like writing this book with your dad? I loved, even from the first chapter, talking about, the birds and the bees. It's funny to me because I have 3 kids, and I never had the talk either. It's just funny how everybody thinks that you have that talk, but you don't. And then when you actually do, it's awkward.
Oh, it's so awkward. Well, we were encouraged to know that most people also had never had any of these talks. The premise of the book, it's called Good Talk, Dad, was that, and that's the Chevy Chase quote in Vacation.
Yeah.
Where they have like this awkward moment, and then Russ, his son, just goes, "Good talk, Dad," because they didn't really have the talk. Like, neither of us wants to do this, so let's just walk away and say good talk. So the joke of the book was that we never had any of these talks explicitly anyway. So we went back, and me then as a 40-year-old and my dad as a 70-year-old, finally having the father-son talks now that I'm grown with 2 children and he's got grandkids. So that was sort of the premise of the book. And we just wrote back and forth. So I'd start a chapter, send it to him, and he'd reply to it, and then vice versa. And then we kind of wrote in these other little vignettes as well. But for me, it was a really cool way to capture and memorialize my childhood and my relationship with him, because we don't sit down and do that very often, or at all, maybe. And to have it in a book that's on a shelf now that my kids can go, oh, I love the story of when they call my dad Bumpa, because that's how my daughter said grandpa when she was a baby. I love the story of Bumpa when he worked at Arrowhead Lodge at Lake of the Ozarks when he was a kid. And like all this, it gave them a fuller picture of their grandfather, but also they learned some stories about me. And so it's kind of in a way, it's an oral history of my childhood and some of my dad's childhood, and my kids and their kids will have it. So that was the big motivation to do that. It was like, let's get all our stories down in one place.
Yeah. Well, your dad delivers some great lines in the narration. And there was one as part of that first chapter, I know, where his voice is so unique and so quirky and just so engaging and memorable. But he tells the story, and I'll just give you the punchline. You'll probably remember it. He says, "Where was he rubbing her? In her driveway."
That sounds right. Yeah, that sounds like him. Yeah. I think I think he tried, we wrote in the book, if I remember right, he tried once to have a conversation when I was a kid, but with the safety of the Yankee game on the TV.
Okay.
And then he said something about, I don't know what. And I think we both looked at each other, and he said, "Winfield looks good tonight, huh?" It's like, quick, get back to the game as fast as possible,
Yeah. I think about the only thing I remember saying to my son was, you know what you call a guy who doesn't use a condom? Dad.
Exactly. That's good, by the way. That's a good approach.
You can use that with George, although I don't know how old is George now?
He's 15, so okay. Yeah. But what's interesting is I always assumed, because we had it, that there's this kind of conversation and sexual education happening in school. It turns out it might not be happening to the extent that we would want it to be, to have somebody else handle the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are, of course, all these other ways, unfortunately, now that they can learn about sex online in ways that you don't want them to learn about sex. So it's almost more important now to intervene and at least provide the right version of the story, no matter how awkward it is. So I've tried to do a little more than my dad and I did.
Well, you do have a lot of Chicago running through your veins, Willie. And I know you left Evanston at 5 when your dad got the job in New York, but you were a good athlete. And I know that you went to University of Illinois for summer camps and you were always a fan. But how did you not go to Illinois? You ended up at Vanderbilt.
Sore subject.
Sorry.
By the way, my sister, even worse, went to Wisconsin. She went to a rival. It's like crazy. My dad is from Champaign, as I mentioned. And my mom is from Barrington. So they're both Illinois. And they met at the University of Illinois, as my dad says, in his second senior year. He needed 5 years to graduate. So he said he's turned out to be great. He met my mom. His line always is, he didn't really have any other choice of where he's going to school. As I said, he grew up pretty humbly. And they said, you can go to Illinois because you can live at home. You're not only in state, you're in town. Mm-hmm. Grew up in Champaign. And he claims, I would love a fact check on this. He claims it was $135 a semester to go to Illinois. This is 1963, I think.
Okay.
And his line always is, my parents had to choose between sending me to college and picking up the dry cleaning. It was about the same price. I love Illinois. Like you said, I went to Lou Henson's basketball camp every summer, lived with my grandmother, who still lived in Champaign at the time. I had lived growing up in Chicago. I had a poster of Kenny Battle from the Flying Illini on my wall. I had the Chief Illini wallpaper in my room. We were all in for sure, and still a huge fan of Illinois. When I'm not rooting for Vanderbilt, they don't play very often, luckily, so I don't have to choose. But I guess I just wanted to do something a little different than my parents, maybe. But I still have huge affection for Illinois.
So you graduate from Vandy, and it sounded like you didn't really know what you wanted to do, right? I mean, what was your...
Well, I was a political science major. They didn't have communications or journalism or anything like that at Vanderbilt. So I was a poli-sci major, and I did an internship the summer before my senior year in college, where I worked in TV, but in politics. It was during a presidential election. It was 96.
Yeah, 96 in San Diego, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and I went to the conventions and San Diego was a Republican. I went to all these events and just kind of caught that bug of TV and politics. So when I graduated from Vanderbilt, a whole bunch of my friends moved to Atlanta because that's one of the places a lot of kids in the South go after they graduate. Mm-hmm. And I applied for a job at CNN with this idea of politics and the news in my head, and they didn't have a job, except they did have a job at CNN SI, which was CNN and Sports Illustrated. Right. Had built a 24-hour sports network. I loved sports. Part of my job interview was answering like a 40-page questionnaire about things I'd been training for my whole life and never thought I'd use, like, who's the all-time rushing leader? And I was like, oh, this is amazing. Barry Sanders, or whoever it is, Emmett Smith. So I got a job. I got in the door at CNN working in sports, and I was there for about 6 years, right? As a production assistant, literally watching games, writing down the best plays and handing them to an editor to cut highlights. And then I became an associate producer and a line producer, putting the show together, and a field producer, and did all these. It really was my version of journalism school. I learned so much and had so much fun right out of college at that job with a bunch of guys and women my age who loved sports and loved being in the TV business. It was like fantasy camp. It was so much fun.
So do I have this right about the sports love? You memorized is it NCAA basketball championship? What's the trivia on this?
It was, how people count sheep going to bed. I'd start in the year of my birth in 75, and I would do the winner and the runner-up of the NCAA tournament and the coach of the winning team and the most valuable player. So by the way, I can, if I'm ever struggling, I can still pull that off. I will say it stops. I got less obsessive about college basketball probably like 10 years ago. I mean, I still love it, but I'm not in the way I was. But so 75 was John Wooden's last title before he retired. So you got that. And
97.
1997 was Arizona Lute Olson was the coach. Miles Simon was the most valuable player, and they beat Kentucky, I think. I don't know if you have it.
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, who was the other? All right, who was all, the only reason I know because I was working in Tucson at the time.
Oh, were you?
Yeah. So I believe who was the Final Four? I think it was North Carolina, maybe.
Oh, I don't have.
And then there was another random team that you wouldn't expect. I think it was Minnesota or somebody like that. Anyway,
right. I remember that because it was the year I graduated from college, number one, and I can hear Jim Nantz saying, "Simon says national championship for Miles Simon."
Wow, it's the great line. Jim always has one, doesn't he?
Always has one dialed up. Whoever's going to win.
All right, so on sports, I do want to have you tell the story because I believe this was your chapter when you talked in the book about the Cubs and how you were not allowed to be a Cubs fan.
I was born in Chicago, growing up in Chicago. You have the choice, Cubs, White Sox. I was very young still, so I was developing. And my dad says later that he didn't take me to, maybe this was an excuse for not taking me to Cubs games, but he said he deliberately didn't take me to games or have me watch the games because at that point, it's gotten less so now, but at that point it was a form of child abuse to raise your child a Cubs fan because they'd just been tortured. Why would you do that to your child? Of all this menu of teams you could root for, try something else. So I do
under the laws of the state of Illinois.
Exactly. He's like, I couldn't bring a child into this world and make him a Cubs fan, having watching all his friends suffer for all these years. Now, because he was from Champaign, downstate, he actually was a Cardinals fan.
Sure.
Which is interesting how you guys know how that works.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So he didn't feel any particular allegiance to the Cubs. So I think he felt okay not pushing me in that direction. And then when we moved to New Jersey, I became a crazy Yankees fan because I was still in kindergarten when you're sort of the lights going on and you're starting to notice things and root for teams and all that. So I've been a Yankee fan since kindergarten, since 5th grade.
Well, it just seems like you and your dad had a lot of fun. I mean, there's another story where you and your Uncle Herb go to the Rolling Stones concert and your dad.
I put those in a book.
Yeah, your dad has a classic line where he says, with the role models you've had in this family, Willie, it's a wonder you're not in an orange jumpsuit working at the Joliet prison newspaper.
Oh, God.
Oh, man.
I love hearing that stuff because as you know, the farther along, when you're age and Parkinson's and all that stuff, it's just, I feel so lucky to have this record of stories. Like you're saying these things back to me and I know them, but I haven't heard them in so long. It's so nice that like the person's true essence and personality and sense of humor is captured and lives forever somewhere. So it's just fun to talk through this stuff. But that certainly sounds like my dad.
What will you take away from your dad and what have you taken away when it comes to raising your kids?
I think family first. He didn't, a lot of what my dad did was not talking about things, but living them. We didn't sit down and, like, for example, people always say, you probably went into journalism because of your dad. Not really explicitly, except I did watch him enjoy his job. I watched him go to interesting places and have stories to tell when he came home. I watched him at like dinner parties in our town in New Jersey, be the guy who had the story or had heard this thing on one of his travels. I could tell he liked what he did. And I didn't see that with all the dads, that he enjoyed his job and he just had a good way about work. And so I thought, okay, that's a good thing to look at. Like, enjoy your job, find something you like the way he does. Being present. I think back to my dad going to work at the New York Times. He took the short line bus from Ridgewood, New Jersey. The stop is still there. It's a little shed where he'd wait for it. And then I think about how he coached my little league teams, which means I'm doing the math. He's in the city. There's traffic coming out of the Lincoln Tunnel. He was always at the practice at 5:00. Back when it was dad pitch, when you were little, all the pictures I have are my dad on the mound throwing so you go, oh, that's right. He also had this job that occupied so much of his time, but he was always on that bus at the right time to be back. So that kind of being present. And then I would just say sense of humor, which is my son is hilarious. My daughter is hilarious. My wife is really funny. I think having that in your household and being able to laugh even when things are getting a little rough and be able to make a joke has been a blessing.
Let's talk about the state of the media, Willie. John Oliver just did a blistering takedown of sort of where we are right now with the Trump administration. I was in the national cable game for a couple of years, and I'm removed now from a lot of what you have to deal with, I'm sure. But if people are coming up to me in Chicago, local, calling me fake news, you must hear it a lot more from people who don't like MSNBC.
I do, but I also hear a lot of people who are thankful that we're continuing to do what we do on Morning Joe, and so I think people feel like under this second administration that even more lines are being crossed, that more norms are being cast to the side, and that they want to turn on the show in the morning and see somebody trying to hold it together, somebody standing in the breach a little bit, But yeah, of course, you hear it all the time, and it's been, you hear it from people from people you love, and people you've been friends with for a long time. They won't yell at me that I'm fake news, but I think they are more open to questioning what you do every day and how you do it. And the truth is, a lot of them are hearing a version of what's happening in the world that is completely contrary to, in many cases, I would argue, reality, but certainly to some of the things that we're reporting on our show. So it's hard. The frustration I have, because I always keep the temperature low and let's talk about it. Yeah. The frustration I have is I'll say, no, actually, that's not true. This is what happened. Or no, that's not true. He didn't say that, because it's something somebody heard on a different cable show or on a podcast, or that their uncle told them in a Facebook post, and these things get a life of their own, and the things that they're focused on are completely different than what most of the country is focused on.
Did you see any of Scott Pelley's commencement address at Wake Forest?
I did not. Oh. I need to go watch that, though.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, have you guys talked? I figured you would have talked about it on Morning Joe. No.
I wasn't here the last couple of days, but we hadn't.
Okay. Yeah. Well, it happened over the weekend, so he was quite animated.
To move forward, we debate, not demonize. We discuss, not destroy. But in this moment, this morning, our sacred rule of law is under attack. Journalism is under attack. Universities are under attack. Freedom of speech is under attack. Why attack universities? Why attack journalism? Because ignorance works for power. Power can rewrite history with grotesque, false narratives. They can make criminals heroes and heroes criminals. Power can change the definition of the words we use to describe reality.
What do you make of that?
Yeah, no, I need to go watch it is what I make of it first. I mean, he's also has a very specific experience right now with what's happening, at the very, very top of CBS. And I mean, my feeling is if 60 Minutes can be strong-armed, and they're not, to their credit, they haven't been strong-armed, but these attempts to strong-arm 60 Minutes and to lose their executive producer and the president of the news division, all the things that have happened over there. If it can happen to 60 Minutes, right, it can happen to anybody. So I take to heart everything he said. I mean, I think it is true, and a person can't do that alone. A person needs help in the Congress, what he's talking about. It needs help in the media. It needs help in the people that he is able to appoint to push that agenda forward and serve a man and not a country, or a man and not a Department of Justice or a Defense Department or whatever it may be. That's not the way our system is set up to work. But yes, I hear what he's saying and agree with a lot of it.
Well, I mean, this isn't a hot take, but I would assume, it sounds to me like the settlement with Trump and CBS and 60 Minutes is probably imminent. That's what I kind of take away from that, along with the fact, and again, I don't think it's a stretch to think that if this is settled, and I don't know how much the listeners know about the nuances of what's happening between Trump and CBS and 60 Minutes and what's happening with our potential merger with Skydance and all of the, the things that you can read in the trades. But the bottom line is, if that happens, if there's a settlement with 60 Minutes, it sure seems to me like more people will be leaving 60 Minutes just on the principle of it.
Yeah, and that's a slippery slope, isn't it? I mean, the lawsuit is over routine editing for time of an interview with Kamala Harris during the campaign, which President Trump has suggested was somehow edited to protect her, to make her look better, and therefore is an example of election interference. We edit interviews all the time. You'll probably edit this interview. We edit our interviews on Sundays and on Morning Joe sometimes when they're not live, and not because we're trying to protect someone ever, but because you don't have time in your show to show the entire interview. And then they're sort of nitpicking about a promo, a clip that was in a promo that they felt didn't show the whole context. That's right. Promo clips that are 8 seconds don't show the full context. They're an example of what you'll see if you watch the show. So I think that's a very slippery place. If they can settle that, what's stopping them from coming at everything that we consider routine in our business?
Right. And I tell this story a few times on the pod, Willie, that I met former FCC chairman Newt Minow years ago, who famously called TV a vast wasteland. And he told me something I'll always remember. Reporters should be skeptical, not cynical.
Yeah.
And I worry that everyone's afraid to be skeptical now. And my concern is that there's no room for dissent. If it's not complete deference, it's fake news. I mean, you may not like the coverage, you may not like the questions, but you should celebrate the fact that we're allowed to have this kind of discourse.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I think what you and I can do in our jobs is to not give into that cynicism, number one, and number two, not think twice about offering the truth, or in some cases offering criticism where it's valid and where it's warranted. I think the idea behind these lawsuits and everything else is to have a chilling effect, which is to make somebody think twice before they criticize because they might get sued, or to have a corporate executive say to his news or her news president, hey, tell everybody to take a little bit easy here. We can't afford another lawsuit, or we're trying to get this merger through. We need the FCC on our side. That's where it starts to get to a place of where it's dangerous. Now, is there value in, like, for Morning Joe, Donald Trump's administration has come in. You can't just be the insurgent. You should have people from the administration on your show and press them and ask them hard questions. But I mean, I think we've come into these silos of like, we're this team, we're that team, and we just kind of talk to other members of our team. I don't think that's terribly productive either, but it doesn't mean you have members of the administration on and give them a warm bath. It means you have them on to ask them the hard questions that need to be asked.
Well, why doesn't Trump come on Morning Joe? I mean, you're I don't want to say you know him fairly well. I mean, he used to call you and just shoot the bull, right?
Yeah, it's been a long time, but yeah. I mean, we've tried. We always try. I don't know, and it's maybe it will happen soon, because I think he used to call into Morning Joe when he's running for president, and our show is then it was 3 hours, now 4 hours, basically a radio show. So we would say, you don't even have to come on screen, call in. We offered it to Hillary Clinton, we offered it to Bernie Sanders, everybody else who was running, and he just took us up on it. And he would just call in and talk. So I hope he will get to a place where he does that again. He's done a bunch of interviews with Kristen Welker for Meet the Press. President Trump is available. He talks to the press a lot. Mm-hmm. And I think that's to his credit. And so the more exposure you have to it, and the more questions that can be asked, and the more you can press him on all of the things he's doing, the better.
Well, Mika and Joe took some heat for going down to Mar-a-Lago to meet with him before the second term. And it's also a little more salient now because Bill Maher ran into the same sort of criticism when he went and had dinner with him. And I'm a huge Maher fan. I watch him every Friday night when he's on, but I wondered what he gained from that. I get that he, says there's nothing to gain by yelling at each other from 3,000 miles away. But at the same time, I felt like if he really wanted to do something that we could all benefit from, have him on the show. I mean, have Bill Maher sit down with him for an hour. I would. You imagine the ratings on that?
Right. And I think that's what got lost. I don't know about the full Maher story, but the Joe and Mika story was, they're there to lay the groundwork to get exactly what you're talking about, to get the interview, right? Mm-hmm. They were there talking to him and trying to reset, because it's been such an adversarial relationship through the last 8-9 years of, you are about to be the president again. We would like to have you as a guest on our show. We have questions that we need you to answer for our audience, and let's do that. So I think that got lost, and it just in the conversation that people just said, I can't believe you would go down there and bend the knee to them. And I think they would tell you and have said on the air, we weren't bending the knee. We're trying to get the guy to come on the show. And by Donald Trump is the kind of guy who needs that kind of personal relationship to agree to something like that.
What's ahead for the business, Willie? You and I'm a lot closer to the barn than you are.
I don't know, man. I'm feeling pretty close.
But if I were 30 or 40 and in this business, I'd kind of be a nervous wreck. Viewers are cutting the cord. Let's start with the situation at Comcast splitting off the cable properties, MSNBC and CNBC from NBC. What does that mean for viewers, and what does it ultimately mean for you?
Well, I think it's funny. I was just talking to some of our staff out here a minute ago before I came in to talk to you, because they have questions that exactly those questions. What does it mean for us? And MSNBC in this new company, Versant, is going to be part of a bunch of cable companies that include CNBC and Oxygen. They're all kinds of Comcast cable networks. They're going to be peeled off from Comcast, start their own company, be in a different physical space and everything else. So just a totally new entity. The good news about it is that MSNBC is hiring 100 people. So the way our bosses have framed it for us, and I mean, if you're hiring 100 people, it's true, is that we're kind of like rebuilding a new network, which is good news. They're getting more reporters, more journalists, more the kind of people you need to kind of launch a network with all the people already here. So in an interesting way, I think it's an opportunity to not start over, but to sort of invigorate and to inject some new life into with new hires and new money and all that kind of thing. And I think what they would tell you, the bosses, is the money we make at MSNBC, which still makes a good amount of money for the company, goes back into MSNBC. It's not sort of distributed to the theme parks and all these the cable business and all the other things that go on at Comcast. So I think the most optimistic view is we're starting a news network, and that's a good thing. But for me, I think I'll be able to still live in both worlds. Which you will,
okay? Because I know they took Kornacki for NBC, right?
Yeah. They've split up some people, but from everything I've been told is that I'll get to continue to do both, which I wouldn't have it any other way, because Morning Joe is home. I've been there for 18 years. The Sunday show, I love. As you said, it's kind of my creation, and I get to figure out how to make it the best it can be by myself every week with our staff. And so I wouldn't want to give either one of those up. But so what does that look like? I don't quite know yet. I think we're a couple months away from fully sorting that out. But I like to think I'll get to do both.
What's the craziest thing that's happened to you, Willie, on the air or, in the studio? During an interview, after an interview? I know I have a couple stories. I can just imagine what yours are like.
Yeah. 18 years of Morning Joe, a lot of crazy stuff has happened. Sometimes there'll be I don't want to use his name because he's a respected figure, but he was an older gentleman, and I'll tell you after, who was on the show and had written a book. And the sort of pace of TV. You ask a question, the person gives an answer, but not too long, right? Because we're doing a TV thing. And this respected gentleman just didn't stop. And we were up against a break where we had to go. But he was such a respected guy that neither Joe or I had the guts to cut him off. So he kept talking. He's still telling this story. And finally, our producers just go to break. So we're sitting in black, but Joe and I just kept nodding.
Oh, he didn't know?
He didn't know.
Oh.
And we finally just said his name. Let's call him Bill Smith. We just said, Bill Smith, thanks so much. And then Joe looked at the camera. We're in commercial. Goes, we'll be right back. But we'd been in break for like 3 minutes. It was like we had to go through all the paces to make him feel okay. I don't know why that one just came to mind. But then they're always like, for the Sunday Sitdown interviews, they're usually amazing and great. But there's always the people always ask me about the one I did with Machine Gun Kelly, the singer.
Sure.
Who turned out to be a great interview and went on for a long time, but started slow. He had a bad concert the night before and was upset about it and didn't really want to be there, and kind of literally had a toothpick in his mouth and was staring out the window. Like, you know how it is when you interview somebody, you get to know each other a little before you start while they're setting the lights and all that. And then he was giving one-word answers, and I finally, it's supposed to be a long profile interview, so I just kind of stopped and I looked at the publicist. I said, "Do we want to take a break?" And we can. And then that really set him off. He was mad that I had cut him out of this real moment, and this is where I am right now. And how could you try to? So we actually had like almost a fight, like a verbal, a sparring, and I think in a weird way that made him respect me. And then so we came back from that break. And after we'd been fighting a little bit, and he snapped out of it, and we had an amazing conversation that went on forever. And we did a walk and talk outside. And at the end, he's telling his publicist, "Bro, give him my number." And then he like wrote this tweet about it after, about how like, I don't know. It was like these are complicated people sometimes in many ways, and they come with a lot, and sometimes it's not a good day. And managing that is part of the job.
And sometimes they can be prickly, for sure.
Yeah.
Who I can just imagine, you just said that. Who's the one person in your phone you're like, I can't believe I have them in my phone?
Okay, well, there are a lot, but I have, because I grew up in New Jersey, John Bon Jovi.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we have very, very close mutual friend, and so we've become good friends. And every time I open my phone and I get to like, when you're like searching the person's name to send a text, I can't believe that's.
Yeah.
And then like John Bon Jovi responds. I grew up in New Jersey. Now I don't have Springsteen's number, but Bon Jovi was our guy. Like,
have you had Bruce on the?
No,
that's
but that's a good one. When you asked who we haven't had yet, he's way up there. I don't know why. That's another one. How has that not happened?
Yeah. You got some work to do, Willie.
I know. You're stressing me out. I got to get booking.
How often do you get back to Chicago? You have family here, right? In Naperville?
Yeah, we still have some family there. When we have good friends who live there. I think the last time I was there was a convention last summer.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I guess once a year, probably. My daughter's getting ready to go to college, and selfishly, part of me was hoping she's not, but hopefully that she'd go to Chicago so I could be there more often. Even going back last summer, sort of grew up in New York, which I love, but then you go to Chicago and it's like, got all the best parts of New York, but it's more manageable, and the lake is there. I was just like, God, I love it here so much. It's such it feels like a local town. It's a huge city, but it just feels like a town, and that's what I love about it.
What do you love to do when you're here? What's your go-to when you come back?
Got to get the pizza, of course, not to be too cliche. Go to a Cubs game. I did go to a Cubs game during the when we were there for the convention. They were home that week, so we went to a Cubs game. A couple of guys. Go to a ball game, and it reminds me of being like with my uncles who are all from Chicago, and like they'd take me to a Blackhawks game and go to Chelly's bar afterward.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking, like, I guess thinking back on it, they were probably in their 30s, and just thinking like, this is what like adulthood, this is what manhood feels like. You go to a Blackhawks game, you go to the bar afterward, and, it just felt, there's something that just, I don't know, it feels, even though I moved when I was 5, I think because my family's from there, and it was such an important place to my dad in his career, it feels like home.
So if you were a baseball player, you'd be a utility infielder, I think, just how versatile you are and valuable. If you were the utility infielder, who would you be?
Jose Akendo. He used to play for the Cardinals, played all 9 positions. I think he played 9 positions in one game. It was sort of a stunt, but I think he played like every inning. They put him at a different position. Luis Sojo, loved him on the Yankees back in the day. I mean, let's be honest, utility's nice, but I'd rather be Aaron Judge and be the guy. You know what I mean?
Well, you are the guy, Willie. Listen, I can't thank you enough for the time. I'm a huge fan. You're so good at what you do. Say hi to your dad for me. It's really been a pleasure chatting with you.
I will. Thanks for having me, Joe. Appreciate it. Love to Chicago.
My thanks to Willie and the folks at NBC who made him available. Our audio engineer is Brian Griggs from Brian Griggs Productions. Ellie Coder edits our social media content. The original theme music provided by Chicago vibraphonist Thaddeus Tukes. My thanks to Bill Curtis as well for the introduction. I'm Joe Donlin. I'll see you on CBS News Chicago. It's available everywhere on the CBS News app. And as always, I thank you for listening to Chicago Unscripted.